The stench of hysteria was pungent. The lights, repeatedly blinking on and off, did not help matters. As did the infrequent blare of deafening sirens, punctuating the anguished screams and breaking of bones. All hell broke loose. Danzo stood in the safety of the indoor balcony, looking down at the arena with eyes that simmered with interest. He looked like death, and in many ways, he was. An analog counter hung on the other side of the area, counting down from 500 with each confirmed death. Below, the murderous depravity of Danzo's making reigned. 99 counted in his head all of the siblings he killed so far. 74. The blood drenched his face and shirt, caking under his fingernails and oozing from the cuts on his body. His blonde hair was matted to his head, jaggedly slashed in areas by rough blades, and his vision doubled from exhaustion. He swung his fist into his sister's chin and the blow connected, bending under her stubbornly retaliating kick and rising with an uppercut. Her feet lifted off the ground and she fell back, landing hard on the ground. 99, stifling his crying through his clenched teeth, sped to her and picked up a discarded and bloodied kunai from the ground, straddling his sister's chest and plunging the blade into her chest. His knees forced her arms at her sides and his weight kept her down. Blood bubbled from her throat as she gasped, wide-eyed at the blade sticking out of her heart. A voiceless apology hissed from Naruto's lips and the girl looked at him, her vision hazy but still somehow struggling to live. Blood painted her teeth and she screamed, her blackened eyes bugged with mania and the urge to live. Naruto pulled out the knife and stabbed her again, yanking it out and driving it in 10 more times until her shirt and chest were in tatters. She stopped moving after the 10th stab, but Naruto wanted to make sure she was dead. He pushed the edge of the kunai into her neck and dragged it across her throat, hard enough to fling the weakened boy to the ground. Blood freely seeped from the deep cuts to her neck and chest. 75. Naruto though was heaving mournful breaths, lying on his front on the ground as pure mayhem ensued around him. His body shook from his wounds, and he forced his arms under his body, pushing himself up with a visible tremble in his arms, clutching the kunai in his hands like it was his only saving grace. His Byakugan flickered off and on, and the boy cursed his low chakra reserves. He closed his left eye and prayed for his chakra to stay with him for just 5 more minutes. The scream of the sirens kept him conscious. He sat back on his heels, shoulders heavy and panting raggedly, and looked up to the indoor balcony. Danzo looked down on him with palpable hatred. The tears prickling 99's Byakugan finally fell. A jarring haymaker struck the back of 99's head and he fell onto his face, the kunai flung from his hand and a kick to his side cracked against his left elbow, breaking his arm and smashing him into a wall. He slumped against the wall and his body sagged from his concussion. Pure adrenaline and instinct alone pushed 99's body to the right, scrambling blindly from the sharp bones impaling his former position. His steps trembled as he forced himself back to his feet, blinking his eyes and catching sight of 3 of his siblings surrounding him with his back to the wall. The lights kept blinking off and on, messing with 99's vision. They looked worse for wear, much like Naruto, and they each hefted chipped and bloodied swords. 99 wordlessly glanced up at Danzo again, as did his 3 siblings, and their master sent a nod down to the 3 siblings. The message was sent. Danzo wanted 99 dead no matter what. The boy with the Byakugan bared his teeth in a fierce snarl and faced his brothers and sister, raising his hands and closing them into hard fists, lowering into a simple fighting stance and swaying ever so subtly from blood loss. His one open eye blurred for a moment, but he shook away the urge to pass out. Blood dripped from his nose. There was no need for words. 99 ran to them. The blinking lights made it look like the boy was teleporting. He zigzagged around bones blasting out of the ground and dipped under a horizontal slash aiming to cut off his head, punching the attacker's stomach with all of his strength and using a bit of his chakra to burst 2 chakra points in his opponent's gut, sending him off his feet and onto his back. The boy reeled in agony from his destroyed chakra points, but 99 was busy with his other 2 siblings. The shouts and wails of death around the arena were stifled by the screams of the siren. 99 loved his siblings dearly, even after knowing that they were purposefully sent by their master to make sure he was killed, but the boy with the Byakugan wasn't going to die. The same sentiment was shared by everyone else in the arena. From his low position, 99 swung his heel low and the opponent jumped, throwing his sword down at 99. The Byakugan boy roughly flung himself out of the way, tucking into a roll and pushing off the ground with his hands away from a hail of swords. 99 latched onto the walls with his chakra but cursed again when he slid off seconds later as he ran out of usable chakra. His Byakugan deactivated. He leaned to the left and a sword impaled the wall, barely cutting his cheek. He grabbed the blade from the wall and crossed it over his chest, blocking a second sword, lowering the sword to his stomach and deflecting a sibling. With his other hand, 99 whacked his brother at the back of his head with a chop, driving a knee into the boy's nose and a left fist into the side of his head. The boy planted into the ground afterwards, using the momentum of his fall to roll on his side and flick his right wrist, forming another katana from thin air. The samurai could make blades from nothing, and he was among their master's strongest core. He wasn't going to be brought down by a simple broken nose or bruised cheek. 99 then grunted in pain as a sister, among those that ganged against him, materialized behind him and drove her sword into his lower back. Bleeding from his broken nose, the samurai reared back at his voiceless brother and roared as he ran to 99 with his sword trained on Naruto's heart. 99, reeling from being stabbed in the back, drove an elbow back and cracked it against his sister's temple, forcing them to the side and her into the line of attack from the samurai. The samurai's sword pierced her left upper arm clean through, cutting through her ribs, her left lung, her heart, her right lung, and then jutting out from her right shoulder. Shocked stillness gripped the samurai at his mistake. The impaled girl lost hold of the sword in her hand and 99 stumbled away, wobbling off his feet as the girl and the samurai collapsed onto their knees. 99 collapsed onto his knees, the sword still cutting into his back and exiting his stomach. He blindly reached back, fumbling painfully for the handle of the sword and shuddering from agony. He cried incoherently, heaving and reaching back for the handle of the sword. His breathing quickened and he gasped when the blade was torn out from his back. 99 looked at the bare feet of the person who had helped him, caked with blood and mud, and his eyes crept up the person's legs till 99 was sitting back on his heel, looking up at one. The boy knelt helplessly before her. The girl wore a stern frown, holding the katana in her right hand and breathing evenly. Despite himself and everything he had done that night, 99's eyes crinkled with a waning smile and chuckled breathily. She looked much worse than him, bearing a blackened left eye, stabs in her right forearm, standing with a limp and a deep cut across her stomach, bleeding heavily. He didn't know how she was still on her feet. The girl tipped her chin up and inhaled, exhaling from her mouth. Too tired to lift his hands and sign, the boy mouthed, timing his words to when the lights were on. She read his lips as he mimed, "Make your move." One chewed on her tongue and her frown became more visible. Then she scoffed and a slight smirk lifted a corner of the lips. She discarded the sword and held her hand down, just as the sirens stopped and the lights stayed on. The siblings that weren't dead all turned to the analog counter hanging above the arena, and they saw the number on the board. 100. One helped her brother onto his feet, tossing his arm over her shoulders and helping him to stay on his feet. "I'm glad you're still alive, brother," one whispered, unable to keep the pain from her wounds from her low tone. Naruto grunted, jokingly bumping her head with his. He was still mad at her for attacking Kakashi all that time ago and claiming that his Hatake brother made him weak, and this was the first time they had spoken in months, but he was also glad she wasn't dead. 99's pale stare slowly turned from one and looked up at Danzo. To the man's credit, his disdain wasn't plain on his face, though the dark glower in his black eyes was plain to any core sibling that caught it. However, they didn't know whom the detestable look from their master was directed at. Except 99. The boy's heart broke and his knees weakened, only staying on his feet because one refused to let him fall. The girl spied her brother's grief and her eyes widened, glancing briefly to her master and then returning her horrified look to 99. She knew who her master was looking so scornfully at, and her heart splintered with grief and betrayal. It was a weight of betrayal that made bile nearly surge up her throat. Danzo's expressionless look turned away from 99 and he addressed the other core operatives, opening his arms welcomingly and saying, "Well done, children. You have all shown your superiority over your fallen siblings, and you have displayed your loyalty to our glorious cause." The children could barely stand, choking back their tears and looking up at their master with glazed eyes. The vision I have for Konoha will now be accomplished by you, my chosen 100. The entrance of the arena was unlatched and opened. 99 tore out from one's support and ran out of the arena, bypassing the root ninjas that had opened the entrance and speeding into the pitch-black forest. The betrayed and distressed stares of his surviving siblings followed Naruto into the dark, as did the root ninjas Danzo sent after him. Foy.